are live indeed. Good morning, good day, good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are patching in from. Good morning to you, Lee. Good to see you. So we're still waiting here for some people to join, but I think we have quite a packed schedule today coming up. So we're also a lot of interest being shown. So that is super nice. And where I'm patching in from now, it is 10 o'clock in the morning here in Stockholm, and for you, Lee, it's even earlier, right? So
9 o'clock in the UK.
all right, all right. Okay, everyone. Then I think with that being said, let me share my screen and then we can start to get into this. So, right. Indeed. A very welcome everyone to today's session about DORA and NIS2 compliance in ServiceNow, which is pretty much a CMDB and IRM deep dive delivered to you by Einar Partners together with Wrangu here today. We are super excited that so many people have already signed up and are able to join here. So as I said before, we have quite a packed schedule, and we don't only have slides today, but we also want to show things in the system, which means that right now we're gonna get cracking to it straight up. So in case you don't know who I am, who is speaking, my name is Alexander Ljungström. I am the managing director here at Einar Partners. And personally, this is a topic in general which I am very interested in. I'm very passionate when it comes to IT operations. I've been working with it now for over 15 years, and 4 years ago I founded Einar Partners. And especially what I'm passionate about when it comes to IT operations is the topic of governance and how essentially people can cooperate better to improve data quality, processes, and really create like a better structure when it comes to how we're operating our IT environments. And I think that ties in pretty well to today's topic of resilience, DORA, and NIS2, among other things. Now, I'm not alone with me today, but I have my good friend Lee with me from Wrangu. So Lee, who are you? A few words about yourself.
Thank you, Alex. My name's Lee Charles. I am the Center of Excellence Lead for Risk and Compliance at Wrangu. What does that mean? I have been neck deep in risk and compliance now for about 6 years with Wrangu, working with various customers from big to small all over every industry. And I have managed to pick up a lot of wisdom along the way. I've learned from bad mistakes, but mainly I've loved ServiceNow. I've been working with it for 14 years. ServiceNow architect, consultant. I've been with the tool for a long time. I've seen it grow, and now I see how it can really help people with compliance, with governance. I started with IRM, and I've never looked back. I love the application, and I can really solve customers' problems with it.
Love it. And I've already learned from things from you already. And I think today we have over 100 people signed up, which is absolutely fantastic. So I'm looking forward today as well to take part of your wisdom here a little bit. But before we do so then, what will we actually go through today then? Well, first of all, we will look at some of the critical elements of DORA and NIS2, where you, Lee, will tell a little bit more around what is the industry sort of currently busy with. I will then zoom in a little bit on the CMDB side, service governance, and the different layers there. We will have a look at IRM, so the integrated risk management, a little bit around controls, vendors, etc. And then, last but not least, have a little bit of analysis, insights, and Q&A too. It should be mentioned here that we will also show an actual end-to-end demo today. So it is a packed schedule, like I said before, and to set some expectations here then, first of all, in the first segment of the webinar, we will gonna focus on some conceptual aspects. Then after that, we will move into the sort of hands-on in the system of things, especially around CMDB, CSDM, and IRM aspects. And last but not least, the scope here is really for anyone who either is looking to get started or already have gotten started on their DORA/NIS2 compliance journey. There is a caveat here, which is I'm going to speak about CSDM quite a lot. And I will assume that people who join the call here today knows sort of the very fundamental concepts of CSDM. So I will not give like a full CSDM crash course today. In case you're curious about what CSDM is, Einar Partners, for example, have a lot of videos about this on YouTube, which you can check out. Another little housekeeping thing, you guys have a Q&A box here in Zoom. So if you have any questions, you can submit them there. We will either address them by the end, or if it's a very quick question, we will try to take it straight up. Or if not that, we will hopefully get back to you after the webinar. Also, this will be recorded and the session here will be distributed on YouTube too. So me who are speaking, as I said, I represent Einar Partners. And to just box in very briefly who we are, we have a very easy sales pitch. We do one thing and one thing only, that is ITOM in ServiceNow and everything which falls under the umbrella of ITOM. And obviously CMDB, data models, service operations, that's something which very much is relevant there. And we also focus quite a lot on like governance of these things, and we love to simplify things which is complex. And the reason why I think it's very relevant for us to be here today speaking about this is because we've already been working with 6 major financial institutions on their DORA journey. So the deadline is approaching. So before I hand over to you, Lee, maybe you want to say a few words about Wrangu and who you guys are.
Sure. So we're in a very similar position. Wrangu are a specialist ServiceNow partner. We only focus on risk and compliance, cybersecurity, and privacy. That's all we do. And there's a lovely tie-in because we understand the CMDB, we understand the CSDM. In fact, in a lot of cases, we rely on it. So what we do is dovetail nicely with other partners where we do what we do and we do it well. As you can see, we also not just understand the tool, but having to work in the spaces that we do, we have to understand what people do. We have to understand the business. And that's what we do. We've come across from big to small, from major energy suppliers and banks through to small little retail, and we can take the experience of the 400 implementations we've done to make sure we solve the customer's problems and listen to what they actually need. And that's what we do.
I'm super excited. So I'm going to hand over to you here if you share your screen, Lee, but I'm especially excited here because this is the first time Wrangu and Einar Partners are doing something like this. So 2 specialist firms getting together. But I think now we're going to set the scene here a little bit, and especially for you, Lee, there to explain the DORA and NIS2 a little bit.
Okay, NIS and DORA in 2 minutes. Well, let's go back to what they really are trying to achieve rather than into the regulation in depth. So DORA is specifically designed to improve the resilience and the protection of the financial industry. It's designed to protect it from the challenges that it faces today, from rogue actors, from hacking, from just issues with their own infrastructure. I used to work in banking. I can tell you that there are so many moving parts that it really does need this level of compliance. We need to do better. I mean, if the phrase, if one fails, they all fail. We've seen it before in the past with financial institutions. One struggles and there's a knock-on effect on everybody else. NIS2 and DORA specifically is hoping to strengthen financial resilience by doing the right things. Banks are doing them at the moment, but there's no organized guidance. There is no need to provide that evidence, and now there is. So that's what DORA is there for. NIS2, same thing. European Union is trying to put a unified framework out there, and this is for protecting all of those key infrastructure that are going to keep everything running. Energy is one of them. You know, communications, making sure all of these key areas of infrastructure have the resilience to keep going, protecting from the war in Ukraine. We had the challenges with COVID. It's making sure that they are protected, that they're strong, and that they can continue to provide those services that everybody relies on. That, in a nutshell, is what they're for. And there's a massive crossover between the two. Next slide, please.
And I understand exactly. So if you then look, what requirements will that sort of put on the industry?
It's going to put a big requirement on them from the purposes of reporting. Never before have we had to report and show in the depth that, for example, DORA is asking for. 17th of January, you're going to have to provide specific information in specific reports back to the regulators. It requires a lot of preparation. You need to understand everything in your infrastructure. You need to understand your suppliers, your vendors. You need to be, in the long term, you're going to have to run penetration testing, external penetration testing, and you're going to have to share that information back. And on top of that, you're going to have to invest and provide the training, the resilience into your architecture. You have to know your subject from top to bottom. Your business services you're providing, you have to understand exactly every part of the infrastructure that's providing that and where your vulnerabilities are, so that you can protect yourself against them.
Super interesting. Right.
And yeah, from an NIS2 point of view, there's an extra challenge. So I learned this from one of my clients that I was talking to recently, and he'll know who he is. But from a NIS2 point of view, they have the extra challenge of there's a good chance you have to report any of the issues you have back to that country, back to the country, and you'll have to do it in the local language. So there's going to be a huge challenge where if you have a compliance issue that you have to run through, that you may have to report that back in the local language, which is going to put an extra pressure on the teams that are going to be running these.
Yeah. And the deadline is coming up fast, especially for DORA, right? January 17th, it comes into force. So it's knocking on the doorstep.
With NIS2, I think it's 3 countries have put it into law. There's and I think that's actually the next slide.
Go ahead.
Sorry, it's not the next slide. But so NIS2 covers a wider breadth than DORA. We have things in there such as training. You have things in there such as safety incidents. But at its core, there is a large part of NIS2 which fits against DORA as well. Risk management, incident management, supply chain. All of those things are common across both, and they mean that you will have to be compliant with both if you're in the financial industry. There is, I think it is on the next slide.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. This is where is it coming for NIS, and as you can see, There are a few countries, I think Hungary and Croatia have already ratified, as has Belgium. But if you look, the next ones to come, probably in the new year, will be France and Germany. So there are a large chunk of Europe will be NIS ready by the new year.
Well, it's very much needed right now in a sort of turbulent landscape we're seeing, right? So, interesting. So what does then DORA cover if we take that? Because you told me before that like DORA sort of falls under the NIS2 umbrella. So if you can zoom in a little bit here on the DORA aspect, what's the main pillars of it?
So as I said, there's 5 pillars for DORA, and I'm sure everybody is sick of hearing about the 5 pillars because it's been put on every blog post and every report going. But at its core, you've got to manage your risk within your business. You need to understand your risk against information and communication technology. And you have to have governance in place. You need to have your strong controls to protect against that. You have to understand and manage your incidents. So when you have a cybersecurity attack, you need to understand how that can impact your infrastructure. You need to be able to report on it. And if you have a failure, you need to be able to alert the authorities to that. From the 3rd pillar, the operational resilience testing, this is the kind of the bread and butter here. This is putting everything in place and understanding how everything fits together. And then once you've got that, not just hoping and crossing your fingers that everything works, but real testing, actually throwing as many rocks at it as possible to know that it is solid and know that it is going to be resilient. Doing those failover tests, not just saying you're going to do it, doing your penetration testing against it, making sure that you have external parties coming in and checking this stuff and making sure it's fit for purpose. And then you come on to the 4th pillar, third-party risk management. You need to understand your supply chain. I mean, it proved it with the war in the Ukraine. As soon as that happened, there was massive challenges on the supply chain. In this case, we're talking about banking, so it's more about understanding where those vendors are, what those vendors are supplying, making sure that you don't have a concentration risk, making sure that you don't have one vendor that's supplying all of your infrastructure for your critical business services, because that could be a huge risk. You can mitigate that. You can look into that. Maybe, for example, ServiceNow's 99.98% uptime kind of makes it a good bet. But do you want to put all your eggs in one basket? That's what this concentration risk, this sort of third-party risk management is all about. And last but not least, information sharing. It used to be, I think in the original draft, it was going to be you have to, and now it's saying you should. Information sharing. If one bank has a threat, wouldn't it make sense if you tell the rest of them that you've had this and that they should prepare against it and they protect themselves against it? Information sharing, not only with the regulators, but with your peers. Be able to share this information anonymously, but share it so that everybody knows what the threat landscape is and everybody knows what's out there, so that they can protect themselves for it. Again, DORA isn't telling us anything new. It's just putting it in a framework which guides financial organizations to do things in a certain way.
That's actually what I like the most. That it's not just about putting, checks in a box that like, yes, we're compliant, but it is very much of like a cultural journey as well about what does it mean to be resilient and the industry taking it seriously, so to say. So how does that then fit into ServiceNow, why we're here today? Because here we get very interesting synergies from the bottom. We have the CMDB and the CSDM model, but how do we build all of these building blocks, Lee?
This is in simple terms, we're building a wall, right? We are protecting an organization against threats. And how do we do that? We build it with a strong foundation. And that strong foundation is the CMDB. That's the pivotal information that you're going to know about your critical business services, the things that are going to make you money or lose you money if they're not working. And to do that, you need a model, and we use the CSDM model in order to build this structure of information in a way that can be leveraged by the rest of ServiceNow. That's why it's called the Common Services Data Model, right? It's there to make sure we put things in the right boxes so that we can leverage that information all over the place. So we define those critical services, and then once we've got those critical services, we can use the rest of ServiceNow to provide the picture that allows us to become operationally resilient.
Yeah.
You have the incidents, vulnerability response, business continuity, change, security incident response, integrated risk management, third-party risk management, the threat intel, the service, the service offering outages. All of these things can be put together to provide you with an overall picture of how well your services are doing.
Yeah, and I think we're going to see some good end-to-end examples of this here today, where this very much will come into play. So what we see though, and I think we've spoken about this before we did this sort of webinar here, is that some of the, what I think is the common ServiceNow challenges today is that, like, well, first of all, it's mostly sort of like high-level information available, and it also lacks a little bit of clarity sometimes. So like a lot of people know the what and the why, but then like how do we do it in the how? And I think that's what we want to demystify here a little bit together today. And then finally, obviously, because some of these regulations are not fully live yet, if we look at the industry consensus from a pure best practice perspective in ServiceNow at least, then same there is no like real consensus yet, perhaps. So this is some of the key points that I think we today want to address here today, right? So with that being said, I think now we're gonna get down to some of the bits and pieces of it. So by the way, Lee, you might want to try and allow that screen share now, or the permission. Meanwhile, I'm doing this section as we're going to show a demo in a bit. But for those of you now who maybe never have heard about CSDM before, this right here is the CSDM model. It's the 4.0 model. Now, I'm not going to go through this in detail today, but essentially, when we speak about DORA and the CMDB, then this common service data model becomes incredibly, incredibly important. And I'm actually going to simplify it very much. So what you see in front of you here, it's a very slimmed down version of that model. It doesn't cover everything, but when we speak about service delivery and what we actually need to keep track of as a general perspective within a company, then what we see here in front of us is, from the top side, every company, every financial institution has services. And I'm going to show examples of that later. Then we might offer those services in different flavors, all right? So for example, if it's a technical service, maybe we have platform hosting, and then we offer platform hosting in ESX for VMware, we offer it Kubernetes, etc., etc. There's different flavors, different prices, different SLAs on how we offer our services. It could be depending on geography, depending on department, etc. On the bottom side, that's where we have the infrastructure, and that is where the CMDB comes into the picture, and often a discovery tool. But then in order for these services to run, we need to have an application landscape, so environments, production environments, for example. So this is what I'm gonna speak a little bit more around today. And more importantly here, we're going to look now at, if we zoom in on DORA, and again, this is now based on us having worked here with a number of banks, but what are some of the concepts that we need to know? Well, first of all, in DORA, information assets is incredibly important. So information assets means a collection of information, either tangible or intangible, that is worth protecting. So if we decrypt that term a little bit, it essentially means customer data, financial records, intellectual property, etc. And that usually would go into the information objects in the CSDM model. Then we have what DORA called business functions, and the business functions refer to the essential activities and processes that are critical. So essentially, what functions are vital to deliver product that the financial institution have or the service, and that usually fits into business applications and or services. It can be business services or technical services. And we've seen many variants here depending on which bank we have spoken to, for example, but often they both go hand in hand, and that's what we're going to show some demos around in a bit. Then we have processes. So financial entities shall identify and document all the processes, especially those that are dependent on third-party service providers. So essentially, that's where we look into either business processes in CSDM, which is a very underestimated area of it, and or business capabilities. And finally, we have ICT assets, and there it aligns very well with ServiceNow, where it defines it as either systems, applications, network, or hardware. And that essentially fits in within CSDM to application services and the actual CMDB of servers and network components and all sorts of things, really. So these are some of these critical objects when we look at CSDM from like a DORA perspective. Now, it doesn't mean that you need to have this built out 100% fully everywhere. And for those of you who have worked with CSDM a little bit, you know that it's a bit of a maturity journey as well. And we're going to show some examples of how this can look and tie into each other. Another thing which I would like to speak about is how does it look with the governance aspects then when we speak about the CMDB and CSDM? So there's a couple of key points here. One is criticality. We need to be able to indicate the business criticality of things, and that's actually often attached to some sort of business impact assessment. Again, we will show some examples of this, but typically this would be applied on things like business applications, application services, business services, etc., etc. Then we have ownerships. Incredibly important. It sounds simple, but actually finding out the ownerships within a company on a group level, on an individual level, and on a third-party level, that's not always easy. Then we actually do need to care about the third party too. So what are those outsourced services that we rely on? It could either be cloud, very simple things like Azure, AWS, or maybe we have a third-party provider that we're buying managed services from. But that actually needs to be integrated into the data model and CSDM. And then DORA also mentions a number of other key metrics, such as we need to know the locations of things, either the logical or physical locations. We need to know things like RTOs and RPOs, so recovery time objectives and recovery point objectives, and then things like patch management, for example. And this typically all fits within the CMDB. And this is also a little bit what we're going to show a demo around here in a while. So that was more from like the CSDM and CMDB perspective. Now, Lee, if we look into IRM and GRC here a little bit and break it down in the similar fashion before we go to the demo, how would you explain IRM, like very briefly in a nutshell, for maybe those who haven't worked with IRM before in ServiceNow?
Absolutely, thank you. And yes, apologies for anybody who this is literally their day job. But for the rest of us, integrated risk management, I mean, the example up on the screen here is your business, whether it be financial or critical infrastructure, or even for those who aren't. And there was a question in the chat. I believe it was around what for the DORA is for the financial sector, NIS is security baseline, critical infrastructure. But what about companies or suppliers that do not fall under the Act, especially considering third-party security and risk management? So there is another, and the name escapes me for a second, there is another European regulation for operational resilience, which is specifically the baseline layer before you get to DORA and NIS2. That would be what I imagine would be the starting point for that, but you already have a number of standards for third party and third-party risk management. For example, you have SOC 2, which for managing third parties. So those would be where I would be looking. Happy to have that conversation later offline if that's not answering your question. Anyway, back to this. Organizations have risks. We all know this. We're trying to protect our organizations against these risks so we can make money. In order to do that, you enact policies that are designed to protect you against those risks. And then you want to have those policies working, so you're in compliance with them. And to do that, you do specific controls. So in this case, brushing your teeth stops you from getting holes in your teeth. And in order to make sure you're doing a good job, you don't mark your own homework, you get someone to check. And that's where the audit comes in. In this case, a hygienist who's checking your teeth and making sure that you're doing a good job and points out where you're going wrong. I think this is something that a lot of organizations I've worked with in the past. Again, it's the same challenges. There's nothing wrong with failures. Understanding where your failures are is a key part of fixing them. We shouldn't be afraid of the truth. We should understand what that is and then take the actions to resolve that and do better. The old adage that you can learn more from failing than you do from success. If everything is 100%, then you won't strive to do better. You won't fix that hole in your defensive line. But with an audit where they'll highlight where maybe you're not doing so well, then yes, you will continually improve. You will fix these things. And that's the whole point of this 3-line of defense and a continual improvement cycle.
Super nice. For me, actually, this is some good info. And here we have a bit more complex picture. Could you walk us through the highlights of it, Lee?
Absolutely. And then yeah. I'm not going to teach you IRM in 30 seconds, but what we can see here is the three modules: policy and compliance, risk management, and audit management. They all work together. That's one of the benefits of the ServiceNow platform, which is all of this is on a common data model, and all of this is on a common database. So what we have, and it ties in really strongly with what Alex has been saying, is all of this is underpinned by the scope, the foundation that we were talking about before. And that's where the entity types come in. We use data to drive the entity types in a dynamic and intelligent way. For example, what you'll see later is that we're using an information object, which drives whether something is in or out of scope. And then from that, we create the entities. These are mirrors of the CIs, but they're objects that have ownership, that we can apply risks and controls to, and then manage as individual objects. And we have a common way of communicating when something goes wrong. Those are the issues. So we can raise issues against specific controls. They have actions to fix, and they again have ownership based on the entity. So what we have, sorry, close.
Go ahead.
what we have here is also a way of joining things together. So you have risks. We define them in risk frameworks and risk statements. This is your taxonomy, your hierarchy. We can link those risk statements to the control objectives of your policies. So where you have a risk and a risk statement and a control objective together, we can automatically define that control objective is mitigating that risk statement. And this becomes really valuable when you are moving through the stages of maturity to automation, because then you can start using automated factors and indicators to understand how your estate is doing and really work out what your risk score is in near real time.
Super interesting. And I think we will see an example of some of these synergies now in just a little bit. And if we then look at DORA, then you spoke about it before, but here zooming in a little bit, the main important aspects here for DORA, we see a number of things, but we have ICT, continuous monitoring. Could you elaborate 1 minute on this part here before we proceed to the demo, maybe?
Yes. So this is when we were talking about the commonalities and the fact that both NIS2 and DORA have similar, they're working it from different positions and they have different objectives, but they do have things in common. In here, you can see, for example, incident management. We talked about it briefly, but incident management is a key to understanding what's going on with your organization. Continuous monitoring, as I just mentioned, that can be the difference between knowing the score of your risk and your compliance from a 6-monthly basis back to a daily, weekly basis. Regular testing and assessment, well, again, no point in doing your business continuity plans if you don't test them. So that, and for your controls, we need to make sure that we are regularly looking at these things. And again, automation can help here. Big thing is in both of these is corporate accountability. The EU is now taking the line that it doesn't stop with the team, it stops with the senior management. So it's now everybody's problem, and that's a statement that it should already be. Risk is everybody's problem. And now with the DORA NIS2 in flight, that now is being stated that the upper management now have a responsibility. Risk management and governance, I think it speaks for itself, but everything in my world starts with risk. I went to a conference recently where they were commenting that a lot of people, and the acronym GRC, governance, risk and compliance, most people were just doing the C part. They're just doing the compliance, but you need to understand your risk. You need to see where that is and manage it. You need to know where to put your money. So find the biggest concentration of risk that's applied to your most critical business services, the ones that are, again, making you money, and that's where you need to spend money to shore up your defenses. Supply chain security, everybody needs to make sure that is resilient, and that not only is it resilient, but you know what data is transferred, you know what security protocols they have in place, what certifications they have, ISO 27001 for a start, and make sure that that part of your infrastructure is robust as the rest of it. Otherwise, it's the weak link. Operational resilience. That's the end goal. We want to be operationally resilient. We need to be able to weather whatever comes. And that is a key thought across both of those.
Yeah. And then finally, incident management, which again, obviously in ServiceNow is, quite a common thing. So let's maybe have a look here, a bit of hands-on then. With only 20 minutes left, actually, of course, then I think here we're going to have a very brief look at how does the data model here now look. So I'm gonna stop the screen share for a second and have a login here. There we go. And then after that, I think we actually have to jump to the Q&A session. So, okay, everyone. Now, with that being said, let's have a look at how the CSDM model, first of all, can look for when we speak about DORA and NIS2. And I actually want to start off with the object business applications. So very briefly here then, the business applications is essentially the enterprise system that we have purchased. And for the purpose of this demo, we're using now Oracle FlexCube. And this entire thing here right now is based on Forex exchange trading. So that's sort of the use case that I'm using here. And what we can see here is that, okay, we have purchased like an enterprise system, in this case, Oracle FlexCube, and that actually exists in different modules, similar to SAP, how we have different modules in SAP. FlexCube have different modules, of which one is foreign exchange then. So this is a core banking system. Here we can indicate on the business application side, we can indicate a number of interesting informations like architecture types, what's the install type, what's the platform is running on, the technology stack, etc. We can also here indicate things like contracts, who is owning this particular business application, what is the compliance of it, and things like that. Now, what is interesting is when we start opening here the relationships, because when we zoom in here a little bit, then we should actually be able to see that, oh, let's have a look here. So the business application, first of all, that is attached to an information object. And what that means is that it is incoming and outgoing data of some sort. Remember what I said before, it could be financial data, it could be operational data. In this case, this is actually external trading data coming from Reuters. But we also here see that on top of this business application, we have a number of business capabilities, such as trade bookings, trade capture. We have trade booking for internal traders. We have trade bookings for external traders, and we have a number of other capabilities. If we zoom in here now and go down in the tree, we actually, when we have a enterprise system like this, we tend to deploy it, all right? So in this case, we have actually here deployed a production environment of this particular enterprise system in this case. So a lot of things already start here at the business application and in the design domain of ServiceNow, where we have the capabilities and also the data that we are working with, essentially. Now, if I'm going to have a look here now at how can this then look if we look at the service side of things, because not everything is, you know, we don't just speak about systems we buy in, but we often speak about services we deliver. And if we look at a financial institution, something very common to deliver, that would be foreign exchange services. So in this case, foreign exchange trade services. And again, zooming in there on this business service, we can see that we offer here two offerings. So one is Trade Booking Global for all the traders out there, and another one is an automated trade capture offering. If I here again open and have a look at how does the underlying relationships here look, then we can here see that, okay, our service for an exchange trade services, it has an offering, which is two offerings here, trade bookings, but that now relies on that deployed production environment of the FlexCube Oracle. And if I zoom in on that deployed environment, we can start seeing some interesting things. So first of all, here we see that, hang on here, this environment actually depends on a Kafka cluster. And if I zoom in there, that's when really interesting things starts happening, because that Kafka cluster is actually not provided by this fictional bank. It comes from a third-party provider. So on the right side here, we see that there is a technical service called platform hosting, and that is then tied to Kafka MQ hosting, which may come from a third-party provider that we are using. And they then have Kafka clusters for us to use. So here we actually see a good example of a business application in this case, all of the capabilities, and how that is being deployed in a production environment, which is relying on infrastructure coming from a third party, and that again is coming then from the vendor side of things. So all of these things, they come together here in this model where we clearly can see here what offerings do we have, what is the service landscape, but also what are the applications and the platforms that we have bought in together with the vendors. So I'm going to pause there, and Lee, if we then take that data model over to your side.
Okay, so if you see this first page, this is obviously our authority documents. These can be ingested via a number of sources such as UCF, LexisNexis, or we can bring it in ourselves. Okay. Right, so if we look at the overview here, what we're seeing is the overall compliance of our DORA regulation. We can see which controls are compliant, which controls are non-compliant. So what we can see here is that we built up a relationship, a dependency model, so we understand which applications, which parts are actually making up the services that are being used in the CMDB. This is what we talk about. We're building a foundation. We have the foundation set, and now we're leveraging that foundation. So what we can see here is that the Oracle Flex Cube has a downstream entity with a compliance. That's Broadcom. That's the vendor that we are relying on to provide this. And we could drill down into that, but in the interest of time, I'm not going to. If you just scroll down a little bit, I just want to show that it's not just, there we go, we have a risk status as well. So all of those, the risks that we are caring about, those are being scored, and they are being rolled up to the Oracle Flex Cube and even up to the top of the tree, which will in this case be the bank. So we have our compliance for each of our individual business applications, but we also have a risk score which is showing us where these controls are working and where they're not. In the interest of time, where do we think it's most likely? So we have a vendor view of this as well. So if you go to the workspaces, there is a
that one. Yeah.
There we go. Gotcha. So vendor management workspace, second to bottom.
Yeah, there we go.
And if we flip from the performance to the risk tab.
Yep.
So we also have this. This is the third-party view, so we can understand what's going on with our third parties. If you drill into the total third parties for me, and if we go to Broadcom, so if you scroll down, there'd be a Broadcom. There we go.
Yeah, there we go.
So from here, again, what I wanted to highlight was the fact that we are leveraging what's been built in the CMDB. So once this comes up, and we see the risk overview, but what we also have is, so if you just go to the risk overview tab for a second. Okay, so we have our scores from our third parties, and from, we can get scorings from places like EcoVadis, where we can really understand what these partners that we're using, these vendors are doing. But if you go to the service offerings tab, we can see the two service offerings that are dependent on Broadcom. So we have an end-to-end visibility of how this works. Now, in a really quick whistle stop, because I know we've only got 7 minutes left. If you just go to the, go back to the workspaces and go to business continuity, please. Okay. And if we go to the plans, so planning, perfect. And then scroll the top the business continuity plan, there's one that's approved. So if you just use the little arrow and go to the end, there we go. So what we have here is the business continuity plan for FX Haircut. So if we just open that up.
That's right.
Again, the only thing I really want to show here is, well, there's two things. You can generate the plans, but if you look at the asset dependencies, please, the asset dependency tab.
For those who might be curious, this is actually a business process which is indicated on the business application, a matter of fact.
So now if you expand the business process here, you can see that all of these that we've got from the CMDB are part of the business continuity plan. And what's really worth drilling into is the fact that business continuity and the CMDB have a bidirectional relationship. So you see that update dependencies link there, that button at the top. If we are working from the CMDB, then we can pull all of this information in. But conversely, if we're working from a business continuity point of view, we realize there's something missing, we can add those dependencies in, and then we can push that back to the CMDB, which means that we can have one view of the world. And
super interesting.
I'm going to stop there because I know we've only got 5 minutes left.
Yeah, indeed. And I do believe also we have some time. We should reserve some time here for questions too. So now this was obviously only scratching the surface here a little bit, but I think that with that being said, let me see here what people have written in terms of questions. So one interesting question already here is how far down in the technology stack should you go for mapping here? The moment you delve into the network layers, a number of components, it's where do you cut that line, so to speak, right? That's always the question a little bit. And I think here it's something we spoke about before. It needs to be proportional, first of all. So what we mean with proportional in the case of the CMDB, in my experience here, is networks, especially in the next CSDM5 model, that is absolutely relevant. And a matter of fact, DORA explicitly mentions that network components, and especially if you rely on like your own internal network, that is definitely something which should be included. At the same time, you gotta cut it somewhere. So I think that like try to go as far as possible. I know that's not the best reply necessarily, but still, one thing with DORA, and I should say this, is that on a long-term perspective, is not just production environments, but you should know your entire environment. So if you speak about how far to go, then essentially don't just restrict yourself for production environments, but on a very long-term basis, then that should go as well. Let's see if we have any other interesting questions. So another question we got is, how does this fit into CSDM 5.0? I think there for CSDM 5.0, it fits very well in everything which I showed about CSDM 5. About CSDM, that doesn't change in CSDM 5.0. What might change slightly is the labels. But as a matter of fact, in CSDM5, you will have a lot of new good things, such as value streams, for example, which is very useful here. So
a couple more questions I think I can answer.
Yeah, go ahead.
So Stig, hi mate, haven't seen you for a while. Is the DORA authority document downloadable from ServiceNow? The answer is no. ServiceNow are not going to provide the DORA authority document. However, you can get it from UCF. I've seen it, it's already there. On what ServiceNow are going to provide though is they are going to, and they already have, I've seen this, have set up all the reporting that you need to generate for the 17th of January. That's coming in November. So you'll be able to basically run it and export it. And on top of that, they knocked up some dashboards, but from what I've just heard this morning, there's going to be a whole DORA NIS2 workspace coming. So that won't be for January, but it will be in the next release, as far as I'm aware. Safe harbor. Um, and what was there one other? What does DORA say about tracking cloud components and resources? To what extent do we track?
I,
It's a good question. And the honest answer is I don't know without drilling back into the regs. But what I do understand is that, like all of these, what they're trying to do is improve your resilience. And we've already used it, the word proportionality. So the effort you do. So for your most important services, for the things that are most critical, I would suggest that you need to drill that down to at least the vendor level and understand what that vendor is supplying to you. As far as cloud components, if for example these cloud components are being provided to you by a vendor, AWS or Azure, I think you would be on safe ground with the first audit if you understood what they provided and how, without having to go down into every single component. But obviously, that's my interpretation.
Yeah,
With
I can quickly comment on that as well. What we've seen working with some banks is that cloud components and resources is absolutely important, especially if they are used to deliver what we mentioned before, like a critical business function or a service or something similar like that. Of course, the challenge might be that for cloud components, you might not always have the full insight, especially not if you buy like a managed service. But still, you do need to include it in some point in the data model, even if you don't have the full insight into all the infrastructure behind. But cloud components, it's definitely relevant, not just like on-prem components. And this is where the CSDM model plays into the picture a little bit. So I think that this has been super interesting and very learning experience for me as well, actually, to know more, because we often work with the CMDB at Einar Partners, right? But to actually see here on a high level how that is being applied in IRM in these different workspaces and so forth. So I would like to thank everyone for having attended this session. We're really just scratching the surface here today, and obviously there is so much more which can be said here, but if you are curious about these things, then yeah, there is a lot of material that we are posting around CSDM, around CMDB at Einar Partners, so you can follow us on LinkedIn. Wrangu, you guys are the absolute thought leaders within this space, which I have a lot of respect for. So same there, you guys have a page where on your website where people can navigate DORA better. We received a lot of questions and a lot of engagement. So if anyone here is curious to know more specifics around these things, then you can always reach out. But for now, this session will be available for you to have a look at later on YouTube. And then, yeah, simply make sure to keep on engaging and following with us to stay up to date with the latest within this field. And with that being said, I think we are sharp 1 hour done. So I'd like to thank everyone. I'd like to thank you, Lee, for breaking down this area so user friendly for me at least and for the rest here. So I think this was great despite some screen sharing hiccup, but hey, that's technology for us. So
my pleasure. Please for inviting me, Alex.
Definitely. So I wish everyone a great day then, and hope to see you all again soon. So thank you very much.